Trolley problem memes, but taking them seriously again. Let's go. You find yourself at a lever. A runaway trolley approaches 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 towards infinity people who are tied to a set of tracks. Pulling the lever will divert the trolley onto a different set of tracks where no people are tied to the tracks. Do you pull the lever? Okay, I understand that at first glance this looks like a bit of a stupid one, and maybe the joke is supposed to be just how obvious this decision is, but it's not actually quite as simple as that. And the man that we have to thank for that is the great Indian mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan. What do you get if you take 1, and then add 2, and then add 3, and add 4, and add 5, so on to infinity? That is, what do you get if you sum the total of the series of all natural numbers? Now you may think the answer to this question is infinity, or that it's incalculable, or something like that, but the Ramanujan summation put the value at, get this, minus 1/12. This is one of those fun little quirky things about numbers that seems to be doing nothing more than seeking to undermine the legitimacy of the entire mathematical enterprise. However, there is an explanation for this. I'm not a mathematician, but there's a great video by Numberphile explaining why it is that if you take 1, add 2, add 3, add 4, ad infinitum, you might just end up with minus a 12th. And I'll make sure that's linked in the description if you're interested in the maths behind it. But I can assure you that this is a real thing, and it does, at least in some contexts, make sense. So think about it. Going back to our meme now, on one of the tracks are no people whatsoever. On the other track is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and if Ramanujan is to be trusted, what does this mean? It means that the total number of people on the track is minus 1/12, which seems to have the implication that if you allow the trolley to run over all of those people, you'll actually be saving a 1/12 of a person. Now do with that information what you like, but for me I think it does two helpful things. Firstly, it shows me why I don't think a situation like this can obtain in reality. I don't think there can be an actually infinite number of people tied up on a track, because it leads to some rather wacky conclusions, not just in the context of the Ramanujan summation, but in the context of infinity more broadly. We've previously discussed on a previous episode of Trolley Problem Memes an infinite death type trolley problem, and I'll link that down in the description for a little bit more discourse on why this might be a troubling concept. The second thing I think this does is that it helpfully demonstrates the controversy, as if it wasn't already obvious enough, of saying that the sum of the series of natural numbers does in fact equal minus a 12th. This appears to be something that is somewhat controversial in the world of mathematics, as you can probably imagine, and I'm informed by the arguments in the comments of the Reddit thread from which I took this meme that there might be some problems with the mathematics involved in summing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, so on to infinity, and getting minus a 12th. But as I say, I'm not a mathematician, just something to be aware of. Okay, next. You can pull a lever to divert the trolley onto a different track, but you don't know what's on the other track. You're surrounded by news media that are biased and giving you an unclear picture and mixed information. Luckily, there's a tool that you can use to compare the different reports to help you make an informed decision. The question is, why would you not use that tool to help form your opinion? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that tool exists, and it's the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. I think it's fair to say that trust in our news sources is at something of a low point, and part of the reason for this is fragmented, biased reporting that makes it impossible to develop a balanced perspective. Ground News is an app and a website that aggregates stories from thousands of local to international outlets in one place to help you better analyze stories to find out what's really going on. And check this out, I can go to the blind spot tab, which can tell me which stories are being under or over-reported by the left and the right side of the political spectrum. I can also search for topics, such as religion, and find the blind spot feature right there on the topic page. Recently, a New Jersey court backed a Catholic school's dismissal of one of its teachers due to her becoming pregnant out of wedlock. Let's compare the headlines. A headline from the left-leaning New Jersey Monitor says that the court sides with Catholic school that fired unwed pregnant teacher, whereas the right-leaning Jewish press said religious schools have right to teachers who follow their faith. The former is focused on the reason for the dismissal, whereas the latter emphasizes the protection of rights for religious employers. I can also see that only 14% of the reporting on this story came from left-wing sources. So this is a story that you could easily miss entirely if you tend to only read left-leaning outlets. Be able to read stories that you might otherwise miss by going to ground.news/AlexOC to get 30% off unlimited access for as little as $5 a month. This not only supports their mission, but also my channel. Next problem. The lever only changes the trolley's direction. Okay, so this one's a bit depressing. It seems like we're in a situation of either having to pull the lever back and forth for an arbitrary amount of time, or at some point decide to let go and allow the trolley to run over the poor man on the tracks. Now, it does intuitively seem callous to not pull the lever at all and just allow the trolley to immediately kill this man. However, the other extreme would be to keep pulling this lever back and forth non-stop until he dies from some other means, such as starvation or boredom. So the ethical dilemma here seems to be, well, how long are you obligated to pull that lever before allowing the trolley to run over the man? But it might not be quite as simple as that. If you think about it, if we decide to keep this man alive, he's going to die anyway, and he's probably going to die of something considerably more painful than being hit by a trolley. That is, he's going to die of something like starvation or dehydration. In that situation, it might actually be preferable to be hit by the trolley. And consider that if you do start pulling the lever back and forth, you're now in a position where at some point you're going to have to decide when to stop. That is, if you don't want to allow this man to die of something like dehydration or starvation. So now you've got a bit of a harrowing decision to make. And you've now injected yourself into the situation. So whatever happens in the end, you're kind of a part of this now. You'd also be giving the person on the tracks more time to cognize the situation, possibly even having to have conversations with you about whether they want to be run over or whether they want to die of starvation. I mean, I think I know what most people would choose in that situation, but you're forcing them to actually make that decision proactively. Therefore, okay, it might go against what we immediately think upon first seeing this meme, but I think that you actually probably shouldn't touch the lever at all. But what if it were the case that somebody was bringing him food and water, keeping him alive, maybe even providing him with entertainment, audiobooks to listen to, friends and family to talk with? Of course, I would be interested to know what the motivations were of the person who set up this entire affair, but hey, we're doing philosophy. Stranger hypotheticals have existed in its history. Now, if you keep pulling that lever back and forth, this person gets to have a long and possibly quite meaningful life. They get to listen to books, they get to have conversations with people, they get to spend time with family and friends. Now, you may think this situation is still harrowing enough to allow the person to die. I mean, he's still tied up on a train track, and yeah, okay, although he might find some sort of transient meaning in his life, he's still faced with the prospect of eventual annihilation at some point by this trolley. But if that's the case, if we say that this is a situation in which we should just allow the trolley to run him over because of the inevitability of its outcome anyway, what does that say about the situation of the rest of us? I mean, we're all in a situation where death will inevitably come to us, and sure, we're not tied up on a train track, but we're in an analogous situation. That's the situation that many normal human beings are in. Sure, they have certain conditions and issues that they're having to deal with, but their life is, on the whole, they think, worth living. The inevitability of our eventual demise is not necessarily a good reason to prematurely bring it about. I mean, look, let's adapt this hypothetical. Let's say that the man isn't tied up on a track whatsoever. Instead, he's just going around living his normal life. But for some reason, there's an explosive device that's been medically inserted into him, which if it explodes will instantly kill him. Now, you come to this track and you see the trolley, and you can pull it back and forth, but instead of a person on the track, it's a detonator. If the trolley hits the detonator, this man, wherever he is in the world, will immediately explode. How long do you spend pulling that lever back and forth? It really does seem now that not pulling the lever at all is probably a callous thing to do. But surely you can't spend the rest of your life stood at this lever pulling it back and forth, not only because it probably exhausts you fairly quickly, but also it seems like you might have the right not to do that. Even in this case, where the person involved is living a life that's worth living, a normal life, and you've got this option to keep them alive, I think it's a virtuous thing to do to pull that lever back and forth for a bit, but I think it's very difficult to say that it's a moral obligation. The reason for this is because it seems to commit us to the view that any time we can inconvenience ourselves to save the lives of other people, we have a moral obligation to do so. This has radical implications when it comes to what we should be doing for charity. I've discussed this in a video before called Should You Sell All of Your Possessions? And I'll make sure that that's linked down in the description if you want a bit more detail. But to put it bluntly, I own many things. I own this chair. I own a razor to shave my face. If I didn't buy a razor to shave my face, I could save up the money I would have spent on those razors across my life, donate it to a charity, probably buy some malaria nets and save some people's life. How could my facial hair ever be more important than the life of a child dying of malaria? I think the kind of position that obliges you to pull that lever back and forth is the same kind of position that obliges you to sell all of your possessions to give it to charity until your life is about as bad as the people who you could otherwise be saving. But like I say, there's more information and discourse on that particular problem in the video, Should You Sell All Your Possessions? There is no dire emergency. Do you accept your duty to return the cart even though you gain nothing? What is it they say? This is the ultimate test of a self-governing person. There's no official legal obligation for you to return it to the cart. There's no one around. There's nobody that's going to judge you for it. do you go and put it back anyway? The idea is that if you do, then you're a good self-governing person, because even though it's of no benefit to you, you're still keeping some sense of orderliness and propriety in your life. However, I do take issue with this formulation. It says, do you accept your duty to return the cart even though you gain nothing? I don't think that's possible, I'm afraid. What do I mean? Well, to put it in a phrase, altruism doesn't exist. Many people like me and before me have been of the opinion that there's no such thing as an action that you can freely and intentionally commit that doesn't benefit you in some way. Thomas Hobbes is an example of somebody who thinks that this is the case. I heard a story a while ago that I'm almost certain is apocryphal, that Thomas Hobbes was once walking with a friend or a colleague, and upon seeing a homeless person, Hobbes decided to donate some money to him. And his friend said, "See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's an altruistic behavior." To which Hobbes said, "No, I mean, I saw the homeless man and he looked like he was in pain, and that upset me. And so by giving him the money, that relieved me of the pain that I was feeling through my empathy." Now, this might seem like a bit of a crude analysis, but I don't think it's essentially incorrect. In fact, there are some circumstances I think emphasize this even more strongly. Consider a man who decides to run into a burning building because he hears that there's a child in there trapped somewhere, and he comes out with the child, and the news media run up to him and say, "Goodness, where did you find the bravery to do that? How could you possibly have run into a burning building?" And he says, I couldn't have lived with myself if I didn't do it. I just had to. Something came over me." We think that man is more of a hero. We think he's more virtuous. We celebrate the fact that he's the kind of person that just couldn't have allowed that child to burn. But what's he saying there? He's saying he went in because otherwise he would have not been able to live with himself. He would have been upset with himself. He would have been experiencing something negative about himself. So was this truly altruistic, or was it motivated by something a little more self-serving? Maybe you can accept the milder principle that there's a bit of both going on, but there's no sense in which it doesn't benefit him in any way whatsoever. So going back to the meme, do you accept your duty to return the cart even though you gain nothing? Well, you do gain something. You always gain something whenever you do anything consciously that you in some way want to do. I mean, sure, there's nobody else around. You're not going to have to deal with the reproaches of other people if you leave shopping carts, which, by the way, in the UK, ironically, we call trolleys, in the middle of the road, but you may have to deal with the reproach of your own conscience. We are, after all, evolutionary creatures with an ingrained sense of morality, and we've been mostly socialized into thinking that this kind of behavior, leaving shopping carts in the middle of the road, is unacceptable, and rational or not, this is something that we've internalized. And so I find it difficult to believe that somebody who decides to return a trolley to its place is literally getting nothing from it. Thank you for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.